Again, my name is Daniela Jean, currently serving as the City Commissioner for the City of North Miami Beach. I'm also an author and a social strategist. And we have an esteemed panel today, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and give us a little bit of details of where they're working and what they're working on.
Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. My name is James C. Limage, and I'm with the city of Boca Raton. The city is located on the east coast line of Florida, and it's actually known for its beaches and amenities and all the great things we have, like shops, and our well-known Meisner Park. If you haven't visited that yet, I think you should have a good opportunity to see what the city has to offer. And I'm actually been with the city for about 5 years now. And prior to that, I was actually with Marlin Engineering. And when I was there, I had the opportunity to actually work in-house in Florida Department of Transportation District 4, where I had the opportunity to run our access management program for 2 years, which was really great experience. And then now I'm currently running at the city our traffic calming programs and our temporary traffic control (MOT), which is very, very important. When we talk about infrastructure, this is the key in how we actually keep things moving, and our pavement marking deficiency issue. Again, it's a pleasure to be here, and we want to actually thank Ken for putting this together, because again, we're here to share ideas and how we can actually move forward when we have this opportunity for us to get together. Again, it's good to be here.
Good afternoon. I agree with the commissioner. We're the only one standing between you and happy hour, so we're going to make this as short as possible. I am David Scott. I serve as the Deputy City Manager for the City of North Miami Beach. I've been with the city for about 1.5 years now. Prior to that, I was the Economic Development Director for the City of Boynton Beach up in Palm Beach County, very close to Boca. But my career has been varied throughout my few years of professional service. I also served as the Commissioner of Public Works for the City of Atlanta under Shirley Franklin for her terms. Also Deputy Mayor for Mayor O'Malley, where I was over the operations for City of Baltimore before he became the Governor of Maryland. My background and training is actually civil engineering. So I've done water and wastewater, transportation, traffic, but where I find our strength is really in community economic development. And that's what I leverage all of our public dollars to create equity and grow all of our community members. So that's what I'm excited about within this panel. And I certainly do expect to share a lot of my experiences and strategies to help others as well. So thank you very much, and I'm glad to be here.
I'm Heidi Johnson, and I'm Americans with Disabilities Act Coordinator with Miami-Dade County. In a previous life, I was an attorney, used to practice law, worked pretty much my whole career has been doing something regarding regulatory compliance. I was an attorney for the state of Ohio for several agencies there, moved to South Florida, was the first full-time ADA coordinator for the city of Miami Beach for 6 years, and now I've been with Miami-Dade County for 17 years. So I've been doing ADA compliance since 2001. And what's so great about ADA is that it touches everything, really absolutely everything. And people tend to think of just bathroom stalls and ramp slopes and things like that, but it certainly has an effect on everything from employment to any kind of services and programs. So really the mission of our office is to ensure that every program, service, activity, and facility in Miami-Dade County is accessible to and usable by our residents and visitors with disabilities. So it's quite a mission that we have. I mean, we've got I know you guys have heard from other folks from our county. Today, we've got the 3rd largest municipal park system in the country, 14th largest transit system in the country, largest passenger cruise ship terminal in the world, and so many other things too. Very, very large community. And by statistics, it looks like we have about a little over 275,000 people with disabilities that live in our county.
Wow, so we have an amazing panel. So this panel is Equity in Action, Shaping Florida's Infrastructure Future for Inclusive Prosperity. Heidi, I want to throw this question to you. As it relates to equity and infrastructure, in the context of infrastructure, how does that look like on a day-to-day? What does equity mean in the context of infrastructure for you?
I think equity means, really when you get to the kernels of the essentials of what the ADA is about, is equal opportunity to participate, equal opportunity to benefit, and the ability to do those things in the most integrated setting possible. And that applies to everything. And programs defined under the law are very basic things, such as just the ability to walk down a street, the ability to cross a street, the ability to park on the street like other folks do. So it's really about that aspect of being able to be included and having an equal opportunity for virtually everything, even the things that seem very simple and day to day for people.
Thank you for that. Does anybody else want to chime in on that?
I'll add to that. Thank you, Commissioner. From my perspective, I look at the millions of dollars that our municipalities push out into our communities, whether through construction contracts, whether it's through opportunities, whether it's through grants. At the end of the day, we push millions of dollars out into our streets, into our communities. If we are really focused on equity, as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. If we are really focused on strategically ensuring that all of our residents benefit from the millions of dollars that we push out there, we have to look at how we strategize and perform these duties. For example, how are you procuring your businesses? How are you procuring your contracts? Are you ensuring that you, as many times as you can, or every opportunity you have, you could push that money, those fundings, those opportunities out to your local businesses? That way, you strengthen your local community, they hire local, which in turn empowers your residents. So I look at our strategy and how do we leverage our infrastructure, how do we leverage our investment to ensure that our residents and businesses benefit from those investments.
Yes, actually, added into this is, it's meant to us like creating like an environment where all communities actually receive the service that they need, and the city is responsible for all these needs. For example, starting with traffic calming, like I mentioned earlier, and pavement marking deficiency is really, really important when we actually get to help and see before our infrastructures, especially when it comes to utilities projects. So we actually see exactly what can we do, because we're gonna get through a phase where we actually gonna cut the asphalt and then we're gonna resurfacing. And then when we get to that, so we actually look into the neighborhoods throughout the city, which is divided into different zones and where the projects is gonna come, because we actually have the CIP. So every year, so we know exactly where we're gonna get on and what to touch and what not. And also, it's deliver the service to build a safer and more accessibility communities, because right now we are focused on the MMA backlinks, the greens, markings, and all these things. We're actually shaping the infrastructure for the next generation to come. So when we're talking about this, it's really, really important for the next generation to come and see what are we planning, what are we doing, and this is exactly really important, kind of like we're doing in the city. It's actually get the community together and then get all these things so we can actually get to where we're trying to get.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to start back with you and ask you, you mentioned zones. So countywide or citywide, it's kind of hard to identify the needs of specific areas. How do you assess or strategize which areas to start first, especially as it relates to low economic areas? How are you prioritizing which areas get funding? Which areas get the attention? How would you suggest that organizations and even the private sector diversify how they divvy up their opportunities and so forth?
Again, thank you, Commissioner. So this is actually really important. When we mention by zone, so when you're responsible for the programs, so you actually have different area. We have our downtown, we have the east side, the west side of the city. So this is actually mapping on our GIS, format where we actually get actually complaints throughout the city. So when we receive those complaints, we actually have to put everything together, and then we actually see where the comments coming from. So you can actually track which area, what zip code, and then from there, so you know exactly what to touch on. So for example, like when I mentioned about the pavement marking deficiencies, so where in our work programs or like in a CIP, this neighborhood or that segment, you're not gonna touch it in 3 years, but the markings, it's all faded. And we got a lot of complaints coming through our pavement marking. So actually what we do, we know exactly, when we mention about zoning, so we actually mapping that so we know exactly where the complaints are coming from. So once that's done, so we know we can do like a pavement marking refurbish. For about 2 years, it's gonna last, so it's like thermoplastic. So we know that we give the neighborhood like a brand new of sense of traffic and actually make it safer and better for our people in the community. Because again, it's the same for mention about traffic calmings. So which is something that is really, really big in our community these days. Everybody wants speed humps, everybody wants traffic circles. So how do we prioritize those, infrastructure or those complaints that we get? And again, as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about shaping infrastructure, it's not just about the big picture, so where the small comments come from, So those are the complaints that we prioritize them. We look at them and see, oh, there was a complaint for a traffic signal. So the resident just want a traffic signal. So how do we compile everything to know exactly this is gonna bring the big picture and the big infrastructure project that we're talking about? So this is exactly when we talk about zoning, we make sure that we know where the complaints coming from to make sure we're taking care of all the residents. It's not about this area, that area, so we prioritize them. So which come first, and then where the money is going. So from my part and what I'm doing actually at my current role.
Same question, identifying needs, priorities.
Absolutely. I say it's a mindset, it's a culture shift. We as government, we like to tell you what we're going to give you and then tell you how much you're going to pay for it. So what we have to do is go to the government, to the neighborhood level, really have those conversations. What is it that you need to sustain your community? Each community is different, each neighborhood is different. So we have to start with those community conversations at the grassroots level. Start engaging on a personal level through charrettes, through conversations, through our strategic plan, through our economic development plan, which we are undergoing now in the city of North Miami Beach. We want to hear from our community. Then we turn that around and synthesize that to create the priorities that they have asked us for through our elected officials that will help us align funding to support those initiatives. I'll use a great example. I mentioned the city of Atlanta, and we did a $150 million bond program. And if you know Atlanta, I was the public works director when we just tore the city up. There was one community that we made streets smooth, we got rid of potholes, we were putting in all the landscaping. There was one community that could not make happy. And when we had the conversation, it was a community of mothers with strollers. So all we did was speed up traffic, which was not conducive to that quality of life. So how could I not listen to the community? What was that mindset shift? I just knew that a $150 million bond program said pave streets, get rid of potholes, and make them safer for traffic. But here you had the pedestrians that said, you are doing it all wrong. All wrong. So we made a shift to really start listening to the community, get their feedback and input. So they wanted chicanes, they wanted traffic calming, they wanted more landscaping. Same amount of dollars that we put into the paving went into more pedestrian-friendly context development. So, Commissioner, we really have to listen to our community. We have to do a better job of involving them with community engagement and really incorporating their priorities into our priorities.
Yeah, people with disabilities, unfortunately, are accustomed to basically being left out a lot of times with planning and master plans and that sort of thing. And it's really unfortunate. I mean, people with disabilities are the largest minority group in the United States. People with disabilities are twice as likely to live in poverty than any other minority group. And yet, you know, we tend to kind of get ignored. And building on what you just said, which I think was brilliant, is that, you know, ironically, if you design rights of way, if you design pedestrian pathways in a way that accommodate folks who use wheelchairs or you know, scooters, it actually works for everybody. I mean, if something is wide enough, smooth enough, and you know, there's enough safe crossings and so forth for someone in a chair, it's going to benefit parents with strollers. It's going to benefit people that are on scooters and people with hand trucks pushing delivery items and so forth. So that's kind of an irony there, really. I mean, you know, that if we design things better, it's going to really benefit and include everybody. And I'm really curious, and I'm posing this as a rhetorical sort of question. I'm just curious today about people that have attended. How many of your communities are designing now to be in compliance with the PROWAG, with the public rights-of-way guidelines? And yes, they are still guidelines, but it looks by every indication, those are going to become enforceable standards before too long. I know that's kind of been, you know, the word for a long time, but it does appear that that's what's going to happen. And that means having to create wider unobstructed paths of travel. When you put in or replace a pedestrian signal, it needs to be an audible pedestrian signal. And a lot of other changes there as well. So, you know, we really need to be looking at things rather than piecemeal of, you know, someone calls in a complaint about a crosswalk or something and that's got a disability, they need things fixed there, to looking at things in a much, much more macro sort of way.
So Heidi, you made good points there. So I'm going to go back to you with this question about public-private partnerships. When you mentioned these guidelines are going to be soon implemented, you know, how do governments supplement what the cost will be for these changes that have to be made to accommodate the community? So as it relates to private-public partnerships and economic development, what are some things or partnerships do you suggest individuals look into to kind of perpetuate these changes?
That's a great question. I've never been really a money person, so to speak, in any of the work that I've done, only understanding the basics of things. But I think that, you know, looking at that sort of thing, any kind of way of doing something maybe a little bit differently, as you said, maybe partnering. I think that also, too, we really need to, you know, the three things that people with disabilities want, it's no mystery, right? We want accessible, affordable housing, we want, you know, trustworthy, usable transportation, and we want employment. You know, those are the three. And you know, none of it really matters unless you have accessible, affordable housing. That's got to come first. And I think, you know, having public-private partnerships to develop housing that's going to be along transit corridors, and maybe, you know, also even aligning with employment opportunities. I think that that's really crucial to changing the way that we've done things in the past.
Thank you, gentlemen. Please chime in on that.
I certainly believe that we have to be more innovative as municipalities and government entities. There are opportunities to partner with the private sector on some of this investment. We either have land that we can give up, talk about land banking. So there are things that the government can do to make it more affordable, to build affordable housing, or help developers put a deal together. And it used to be a bad word, working with developers to put a deal together. But how can we help our community if we don't become more innovative or more creative on how we respond to their needs as well? The developers are in it to make money. What do we get out of it? We get a more inclusive project that's beneficial to our community. One of the other strategies is providing opportunities for community benefits. Developers will come to the table if they understand what the needs are of the community, because they want their project to be the cornerstone of the community. They want people to use it. They want the mixed use to be used. They want the restaurant to be used. So how can we partner with that developer to create the foot traffic, to create the destination that is that project? And in turn, they look to our community to be part of that as well.
I want to ask you about with aging infrastructure, especially with the state of Florida as it relates to roads. This question is for you, Jemsi. Roads and such. How do you think we need to bridge the barriers as it relates to equity? We look at these aging infrastructure and we ask ourselves, how will we be able to keep up with the demand that presents itself now?
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about what we have to do in terms of, the city and responsibilities. So again, when we receive and look and so what in our CIP, programs and how we're gonna tackle this, it's what's gonna help us and plan for the long term to come. For example, and I talked earlier about, the utility projects that we have. So when are we planning for those projects? So we already know this actually neighborhood should go under, infrastructure projects. So this is kind of like go into what we have planned from, 2 years and coming up. So that's how we actually make sure we know how to tackle and then choose the best part of, the projects and then to combine and what we're doing.
Thank you. Heidi, this is for you. What metrics and indicators should be used to evaluate the effectiveness of equity-focused infrastructure? You mentioned, for example, you've been in this role for how long now?
I've been doing ADA compliance since 2001.
Right. So what metrics are you guys using to, see how effective you guys have been in perpetuating these guidelines?
Yeah. I think that it would, in my opinion, and again, we have to be involved with virtually almost every function in the county, but I'm certainly not an expert on every function in the county. But I think it would be in measurement in terms of units of accessible, affordable housing built. This is Heidi talking as Heidi, the lady that's a wheelchair user, and not Heidi, the county employee, okay? I really feel like every single unit of housing that's built with any public funds whatsoever should be accessible to a certain degree and easily adaptable later. People with disabilities, people without disabilities, married people with disabilities, people have disabled kids, they have to take in grandma. There's so many reasons, or develop disabilities later on. And this whole thing about, okay, we're building all these units of housing over here for the cool kids, but then you uncool kids, you're over in your little units over there. That's where you belong. And that's got to stop. I really think that's something to be measured by for sure. And how about employment? Employment figures too, of getting more people with disabilities, employed, meaning in meaningful employment.
Thank you for that. Mr. Scott, as it relates to policy and advocacy, I know you're a big champion for economic development. What policies do you think can be put in place? I know as City of North Miami Beach, we've been fighting for policies on community benefits and having these conversations with developers. What policy and advocacy would you see in an ideal world that can help bridge those gaps in equity?
I think when you go back to the definition of equity and how I define it, it is not just race, it's social, it's not disability, it's age, it's also could be class as well. So we look for a diverse community to start with. And so when we look at our policies, are our policies supporting this diverse community that we hope and want for each one of our municipalities? Are we making sure that every one of our residents is included or feels welcome in our city? And by and by doing so, and when we're successful at doing so, people will come and they make your city a destination of choice. I have Aventura to my east, right? I have Sunny Isles to the east. I have North Miami to the south. And then greater, I have City of Miami. I want North Miami Beach to be a destination of choice for you when you land at MIA or you land at Fort Lauderdale. You say, I'm going to North Miami Beach to hang out. So the policies that we put in place have to ensure that we're creating that culture, that place where people want to, as they say, live, work, and play. So we got to look at things like, as you mentioned, working with developers, with community benefits. Do we have inclusive procurement policies that allow local businesses to flourish or benefit from those procurement? Are we looking at workforce development policies that connect, and Commissioner, you know this as well, connect our schools, high schools and colleges and private institutions with the workforce that needs to be trained up into the future workforce? AI is a big deal. Are we training our future workforce to live in a post or a AI world as it continues to grow? I have fleet. If my fleet ready to take on an AI development, are they prepared for the AI vehicles that will be coming, or self-driving vehicles? Do we have the right people in place to even do that? So we have to be more forward-thinking with our policies and really focused and purposeful on and thoughtful on what policies we put in place, not for today, but for those future generations that are coming and moving to our city, and the ones we want to retain, because we want our young people to come to FIU and live in North Miami Beach, not come to FIU and then move on.
Jensen, do you want to chime in? We also want to kind of pivot into emerging technology, if you have anything to add to that, or the conversation that we're having now about policy and procedure.
Actually, not much, but I know that at the city, we actually maintain our, all the traffic signal throughout the city. And we actually have one of the best ITS lab in the city, where we actually keep on innovating when it comes to CCTVs and, you name it. So we actually make sure our resident and also whoever is coming, visitors and investors coming to the city, they feel like, okay, our traffic is flowing. We know we're doing the best we can to serve. So I think in terms of technology, what we're doing, it's very, very exciting on the projects that we have to come, and that's exactly what I want to add it, and thank you.
So the question also is, as it relates to emerging technology, how can emerging technologies like smart cities connect infrastructure and autonomous vehicles and the like? How does equity fall within emerging technology? I'm asking you guys all these complex questions, right? But yeah, emerging technology is part of equity because digital equity, as it just relates to intellectual equity, is important right now as is moving at such a fast pace. How can we emerge on top as it relates to that technology, and how are you guys seeing that in your day-to-day?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, we've seen in the last 10 years or so, scooter rentals and bikes that can be rented or even just taken to be used within a city limits. We've seen zip car rent, just use a car for a few hours or by the day, things like that. None of those things are available to the disability community. And for every single thing like that, every time we see more options for non-disabled, it's one less for disabled. And the disability community is really kind of, not wondering how they can be included. So I think that emerging technology is fantastic. It certainly can open a lot of doors, figuratively and literally for people with disabilities. But they've got to be a part of the equation. They've got to be included. I think that every municipality, if it's large enough to have some sort of advisory boards, whether on women's issues or bicycle travel or whatever, they have to have a board on disability issues. They have to listen to people from the community. That's only one option, but that's a really good start. The ADA, you know, not only does it suggest that, hey, be a good idea to get some input from the community, it requires it. The DOJ will tell you it requires input from the community. And so many times I've seen, and I'm not talking about the county, but other things that I've seen in other communities, where all of a sudden a new program just springs up and it's completely inaccessible, and you can tell nobody's ever even spoken to the community about, hey, what would work for you? What would be good for you?
I want to chime in on that. We're seeing an increase in the use of freebie as it relates to services, and you know the great debate between trolleys and freebie and accessibility. So you make a great point and great need for that. So last 30 seconds of the panel, Ken has given me the signal. Anything that you guys want to close out with, please, Jency? Let's start with you.
Well, you know, in the city, we actually have, you know, like one of our best shadow routes, because we actually have our innovation center where we have hubs of like a lot of businesses, a lot of people, you know, come through and work in the city. So that shadows that we have is actually connected our innovated campus, you know, to the child rail, which is very good, where we have a lot of, you know, kind of like see how the trips are, you know, the rider trips and everything, how's that, you know, connected, which is, you know, got some grants connected with FDOT and SFRTA, which is really good that we keep on tracking that kind of like help, you know, with a free shuttle throughout the city. And then also the director mentioned about the Bright Line earlier. So, you know, we're planning on, you know, put the shuttles to a downtown area to see how can we actually communicate and then get less trip and more accessible for everyone in the city. Thank you.
I think you touched on it. I'm enjoying this panel. I'm sorry we had to finish up. But one of the things that we really have to focus on that we haven't touched on is what I call the culture economy. It's the economy that exists within our community that we're not even tracking. It's the Miss Jones that babysits the kids so that the families can get the jobs every day and work every day. But we don't know they exist because we don't monitor them. It's the guy that is Joe down the street that fixes the car so you can get to your job every day. But government gets involved with that, home-based businesses, and then all of a sudden we have put all this regulation on that and put Miss Jones out of business. Miss Jones cannot no longer babysit the neighborhood kids because now she has to add this permit. And now those people that could go to jobs every day are now have to figure out how to pay for a babysitter so they can get to the job. So we have to be more focused on our neighborhoods. And as I said, more purposeful on how do we help our community build wealth, generational wealth, and be purposeful that not just a job, but how did I give that family the opportunity to afford the house, to afford the groceries, to afford the health care, to afford their quality of life that makes them N&B residents. So we are going to work very hard on the equity issue, which is across the board, not just the ones that you know of. It is how do you make sure every one of your residents benefits and thrives within your community.
Oh gosh, I don't think I could sum it up better than what you just said. I absolutely second everything that you just said, for sure.
Well, thank you guys so much for having us today.